What if Benjen Stark refused the Black and raised Jon Snow at Moat Cailin? Let's explore the depths of it in the video. The war is over. Eddard Stark rides through the gates of Winterfell in the early weeks of 283 AC with a bundle of wool and linen strapped to his chest and the weight of everything on his face. He is 20 years old. He does not look it. Behind him, the courtyard fills with the quiet of people who have learned not to ask too many questions. The rebellion is done. Robert Baratheon sits the Iron Throne in King's Landing. The dead are buried, most of them. Rickard Stark burned alive in his own armor on the floor of the throne room. Brandon Stark strangled at the end of a chain, trying to save him. Lyanna Stark wrapped in a cloak somewhere in Dorne, her name already carved into the stone of the crypts beneath the castle, her name carved before she ever had the chance to fill it with anything else. That is the shape of Winterfell in the first months of peace, a castle full of absences. Catelyn Stark stands at the top of the keep steps with their son in her arms. Robb is only weeks old, pink and sleeping. Catelyn is 19 years old and she has already buried one husband she was promised to, married a man she barely knew, and watched that man ride away to war before she could learn his face properly. She is glad he is home. She is glad the fighting is over. Then she sees what Ned is carrying. He comes to the foot of the steps and meets her eyes and says, "The boy's name is Jon." He says the boy is his. He does not say anything else, and his face does not invite further questions. Catelyn is devout, and she is proud, and she is not cruel, but something in her goes still and cold when she looks at that infant. She does not make a scene. That is not who she is. But the warmth is gone from her eyes, and Ned sees it, and he had expected it, and somehow that is worse. Benjen Stark is in the courtyard when Ned dismounts. He is the youngest of the four. He was left behind when the rebellion swallowed the rest of his family, and the last year has been nothing but absence and silence and the sound of ravens arriving with worse news than the one before. He steps forward. He looks at his brother's face, and something passes between them that needs no words. Then he looks at the infant. Ned puts the bundle into Benjen's arms without asking. Maybe he is testing something. Maybe he is just tired. Benjen holds the child and looks down at the small face. The boy has dark hair. Even at this age, there is something in the shape of that face that Benjen cannot quite name but does not look away from. That evening, the two brothers go to the Godswood. The heart tree watches them from the center of the grove, its carved face pale in the last of the daylight, its red leaves still against the water at its roots. Benjen has been turning over the idea of the Night's Watch for weeks. It has felt like the right move, the place to go when there is no place left, the purpose to step into when the old purposes are all in the ground. He was going to tell Ned tonight. He never gets the chance. Ned speaks first. He tells Benjen what he can. Lyanna is dead. The boy is hers. The boy's father is a man so dangerous that the name cannot leave this Godswood, and if Robert Baratheon ever learned who the child truly was, the boy would not live out the season. Robert has already burned children he believed carried that man's blood. He would burn this one without a second thought. Benjen listens. When Ned finishes, he is quiet for a long time. He knew most of it, or had guessed. You do not grow up alongside Lyanna Stark and fail to know her face when she has decided something. He saw it at Harrenhal 2 years ago, watching her in the stands with something bright and terrible building behind her eyes. He saw it coming and could not stop it. None of them could. "What do you need from me?" Benjen says. It is not a question. Ned does not have a clean answer. He has been working this problem for weeks, riding north with a child he cannot explain and a secret he cannot share, and a wife waiting at home who is already flinching from the sight of that bundle. He knows what the watch would give Benjen. Somewhere to be. An oath that fills the space where a life should go. But he knows what it would cost him too. Benjen looks at the heart tree. He thinks about the black cloak and the long nights and the oath sworn before gods old and new. No wife, no children, no land, no name. Then he thinks about the boy's face. "Let me take him," Benjen says. "Not here, not to court, somewhere no one would look." He pauses. "South of here, at the edge of the neck, there is an old fortress, mostly ruin. No garrison, no lord. Nobody in their right mind sets foot there." Ned is quiet. What Benjen is offering is strange and costly, and there is no word in Westerosi law for what it would make him. Not a father, not a ranger, something without a name. But the boy needs somewhere to be. And watching Catelyn's eyes every time she turns toward that bundle, Ned already knows what Winterfell would do to this child over the years. They stand in the Godswood and they agree. The boy needs a name, a bastard name, a shield to carry through the world. Ned gives him one, Jon Snow. There is one other person who will know. Howland Reed is in the Neck, and the Neck is where Benjen is going. He is the only living man besides Ned who was at the tower when Lyanna died, and he has carried heavier secrets in shorter country. He can carry this one. In the morning, Benjen rides south. He takes no banner. He has no title and no lord's commission and nothing on his back worth stealing. He is just a man on a horse with an infant strapped to his chest and enough provisions to reach the Neck. The Night's Watch will wonder for a while what became of Benjen Stark. Then they will stop wondering. One more man who looked at the black cloak and turned away. It happens. The gates of Winterfell close behind him. Ned stands in the yard and watches until horse and rider are gone and there is nothing left to watch. He is 20 years old. He has buried a father, a brother, a sister, and the last clean version of himself, all in the span of a year. What he has left is a castle and a wife and a son and a secret that he will carry alone for as long as he lives. He turns and goes back inside. The King's Road changes south of Winterfell. It narrows first, the trees pressing in on both sides, and then the trees give way to something flatter and wetter and older. The ground softens. The air shifts, carrying peat and still water and something that has no name in the northern vocabulary Benjen grew up with. By the second day, the road is more causeway than road, a raised spine of packed earth and old stone running through country that is not quite land and not quite water. Reeds rise on either side. The bog stretches away into gray distance in every direction. Nothing moves out there that Benjen can see, but he has the distinct sense that something is watching. Jon sleeps against his chest, which helps. There is something clarifying about a sleeping child. It is hard to be afraid of a bog when you are also keeping a small person alive. The causeway narrows further as the afternoon fades, and that is when Moat Cailin appears. Benjen has heard of it, of course. Every northern child hears of it. The great gate of the north, the fortress no southern army has ever breached, the place where old kings turned back hosts 10 times their size. He had a picture of it in his head from those stories. The picture is wrong. What stands at the northern edge of the Neck is 3 towers and a memory. The largest of them is squat and wide, built to last, and it does still stand straight where everything else has fallen. A tree grows through its northern side, roots cracking the old stone, branches pushing out through gaps in the wall like a slow argument. That is the gatehouse tower. To its left, the children's tower is crumbling at the top, its parapet gone, its upper floor open to the sky. To the right, the drunkard's tower leans at an angle that suggests it has been meaning to fall for several centuries and keeps forgetting. There is no curtain wall to speak of, just fragments. There is no keep. There is no garrison, no smoke, no sound of habitation. There are only the 3 towers and the bog and the road threading through it all. Benjen sits on his horse at the causeway's northern end and looks at it for a while. "This will do," he says, to no one in particular. Jon stirs and makes a small sound against his chest and goes back to sleep. He dismounts and leads the horse through what was once a gate and is now a gap. The gatehouse tower is the obvious choice, the only one that could hold a fire without letting the rain in. He ties the horse, climbs the stairs with Jon held against him, and comes out at the top. The view stops him. South. The causeway runs straight as an arrow from the base of the tower all the way to the far edge of visibility, a thin line of raised earth cutting through a landscape that would swallow an army whole. The bogs stretch to the horizon on both sides. There is no firm ground. There is no place to stand siege equipment. There is nowhere to go except forward along that narrow road, directly into whatever is waiting at the top of this tower. Benjen stands there a long time, understanding what the old kings understood. A handful of good archers on this battlement could hold back a host that filled the road from here to White Harbor. The fortress is a ruin, and the curtain wall is rubble, and there are trees growing through the walls, and none of that matters. The tower still commands the causeway. The causeway is the only way through the Neck by land. That is the whole argument. He goes back down and starts making a fire. That evening the Crannog men appear. He does not see them arrive. One moment, there is nothing in the reeds, and the next there are 3 figures standing at the edge of the causeway, small and dark and very still. They do not approach. They watch him the way the bog watches him, with a patience that has no bottom. He stands in the mouth of the gatehouse tower and looks at them, and they look at him, and nobody speaks. He goes back to tending the fire. When he looks again, they are gone. They are there again in the morning, closer. Howland Reed comes with the dawn. He steps out of the reeds onto the causeway as if he stepped out of the water itself, small and compact and moving with the quiet of a man who has spent his life in country where noise gets you killed. He is a Crannogman, Lord of Greywater Watch, and he was at the Tower of Joy when Lyanna Stark died. He and Ned Stark are the only two people alive who know exactly what happened in that room in Dorne, and he has carried that knowledge south through the neck and kept it as well as the bog keeps anything it decides to hold. He stops a few feet from Benjen and looks at the child. The baby is awake for once, gray eyes open and unfocused on the morning sky. Howland looks at the child's face for a long moment and says nothing. His expression does not change, but something moves behind his eyes, something that recognizes what it is looking at, and he closes it away quickly. "You came a long way from Winterfell," he says. "South is south," Benjen says. Howland looks at the three towers, the crumbling parapets, the tree splitting the stone of the gatehouse wall. He looks at the sleeping child again. "You chose a cold place for a warm secret," he says. "The cold keeps things," Benjen says. They work out the arrangement between them without much ceremony. The Crannogmen will not trouble Benjen. The people of the Neck have their ways and their country, and they do not need Stark interference in either, which means they do not need Southern soldiers garrisoning this ruin, or Southern lords sending ravens about what lies at the edge of the causeway. Benjen gives them his word on both counts. He has no soldiers anyway. He has a horse and a child and whatever he can hunt, and the Crannogmen are welcome to the rest. Howland nods. It is settled. He looks at the baby one more time before he goes back into the reeds. "Does he have a name?" Howland asks. "Jon," Benjen says. "Jon Snow." Howland takes that in. He does not say what the name means to him, or what it costs, or what it covers. He just nods once and steps off the causeway, and the reeds close behind him, and he is gone. That night, Benjen lights a fire in the lower room of the gatehouse tower. The tree growing through the northern wall catches the firelight, its bark warm and orange in the dark, its branches moving slightly in a draft that comes from nowhere he can find. Jon lies in a cradle he has made from his pack and a folded blanket, both small fists closed, breathing slowly. Outside, the Neck is black water and black sky and the sound of frogs singing to each other across distances that have no names. It is not much. It is a ruin and a fire and a child and the sound of a bog at night. But Benjen looks at the boy's face in the firelight and thinks that in every war there is something worth hiding, and this is it, and this is enough. 6 years pass in the Neck, and the boy grows. Jon learns to walk on the stones of the causeway, which is not the easiest surface for a child taking his first steps, but turns out to be good training. The stones are uneven, and some of them are loose, and the drop on either side is a long way down to cold water, so he learns quickly to watch where he puts his feet. Benjen stays close the first months, arms out, ready. By the time Jon is steady on his own, Benjen finds that he has started doing it everywhere, walking with his arms slightly out, ready for a small person to lurch sideways into him. It takes a while to stop. Jon learns to speak with Benjen's voice in his ears. The cadence is northern. The vocabulary is a ranger's, weather and terrain, and the names of things you can eat and the names of things that will kill you. Benjen tells him old stories in the evenings, sitting by the fire in the lower room of the gatehouse tower, stories he half remembers from his own childhood at Winterfell, stories about the first men and the children of the forest and the age before the wall. Jon listens with his eyes open wide, which is something Benjen has never been able to stay unmoved by. Benjen calls him Jon, nothing else. Jon calls Benjen uncle without anyone teaching him to. He just does it one morning and keeps doing it, and Benjen does not correct him, and that is what they are. When Jon is old enough to hold a stick without falling over, Benjen starts teaching him. Not with a real sword, not yet. With a stick first, then a proper practice blade, and the lessons are not lordly ones. There is no training yard here, no master-at-arms calling out stances, no other boys to learn alongside. Benjen teaches the way a ranger teaches, foot placement on rough ground, how to move without telegraphing, how to use the terrain instead of fighting it. He is not a scholar of the blade, but he is a Stark, and the Starks are not gentle with the things they know. He teaches Jon to read the sky for weather. He teaches him to move quietly and stop often and use his ears before his eyes in close country. He teaches him the bow, which Jon takes to more naturally than the sword. There is something in him that understands stillness. The crannogmen come and go throughout. At first, Jon is frightened of them. They are small and dark, and they move at the edges of things, appearing and disappearing from the reeds without sound. And when you are 2 years old, that is enough to make you press yourself against the nearest adult's leg and stay there. By 3, he is curious. By 4, he is following their children into the reed beds at the causeway's edge, learning what ground looks solid and will hold, and what ground looks solid and will swallow a boot to the knee. The Crannogman children do not speak much Westerosi common tongue, but they do not need to. They show him things. He learns what they show him, what ground to trust, what plants to grab when you are sliding, how to move through reeds without disturbing the surface of the water on either side. Benjen watches this from the tower sometimes and thinks that Jon is becoming something he does not have a name for. Not a lord's son, not a ranger's apprentice exactly, something that knows the neck the way the neck knows itself. Once a year, a raven comes from Winterfell. It arrives in Benjen's window, not from the maester's rookery, but from a bird that Ned keeps apart, a bird whose existence is not recorded anywhere. The message is always short. Benjen reads it and burns the parchment in the fire the same evening. The messages say much the same thing each time. The north is quiet. Robb grows well. The realm is at peace. The king's hand holds court and Robert sits the throne, and the business of the kingdom continues. There is always one line at the end that is not about politics at all. It just says, "The boy." Benjen writes back. He keeps those messages short too. The boy is well. The boy is healthy. He learns fast. He burns those parchments too. One evening when Jon is 5, maybe 6, close enough that it does not matter, he asks Benjen where his mother is. It is not a sudden question. Benjen has been watching it come for months, since the day a Crannog woman sat nursing her infant on the causeway stone, and Jon stood nearby and watched with a specific kind of attention that was not curiosity so much as something older and quieter. The question finally arrives on an ordinary evening with the fire going and the reeds moving outside, and Jon sitting across from him with that gray-eyed directness that he turns on things he has decided to understand. Benjen looks at the fire for a moment. Then he tells Jon what he can. "She was beautiful," he says. "She was brave. She loved the North. She died before she could see you grow up, and she would have wanted to. And that is the truest thing he knows how to say about it." Jon listens. He does not ask for her name. He is 5 or 6, and he takes what Benjen gives him and files it away behind those gray eyes with the careful patience of a child who understands, somehow, that some doors stay closed until the person with the key is ready. Benjen does not say her name. He does not say that she was his sister, that her grave is in the crypts of Winterfell, that he thinks about her every time the neck is quiet and he has too much space to think in. He just tends the fire. Howland Reed comes by often enough in those years that Jon knows his face. He is not a large presence, but he is a constant one, arriving and departing without announcement, settling near the fire, listening more than he speaks. One evening in Jon's 5th year, Howland sits and watches the boy stack loose stones into a rough tower on the floor, building it up past where it should be able to stand, adding one more stone and then one more, feeling out the balance with small, careful fingers. Jon's face in the firelight is intent and concentrated and very still. Howland watches that face. There is something in it that pulls at him, something he has seen before, a long time ago, in a very different place. Not here, not in the neck, in a tower in Dorne, in a moment that was the worst of his life, and in the face of the woman who was dying in it. Something in the line of the jaw, the quality of the stillness. He says nothing. He drinks his water and watches Jon add one more stone to the tower, and the tower holds. By the time 289 AC comes around, the gatehouse tower is a different place from the ruin Benjen found 6 years before. There is a proper hearth in the lower room. The shutters on the upper windows hang straight and keep the rain out. And Jon has a room of his own on the 2nd level, small and low-ceilinged with a narrow window that looks south down the causeway. 2 of the Crannogmen have built themselves something at the causeway's edge, a structure of reeds and river stone that is not quite a house and not quite a camp, but is clearly permanent. They are not a garrison. They are not a household. They are something that does not have a name in the language of lords and castles, which is appropriate. because nothing about this place has a name that fits. The neck keeps them. The gate holds. The boy grows. The raven does not come at the usual time of year. It arrives in late summer, unannounced, on a bird Benjen recognizes by the band on its leg as one of Ned's personal birds, not the Meister's. That alone is enough. Benjen breaks the seal before the bird has finished ruffling its feathers, and he reads the letter standing in the lower room of the gatehouse tower, with John at his feet, building something complicated out of sticks. The letter is not long. Ned's handwriting is controlled, but there is urgency in the pressure of the strokes, in the way the letters crowd close. The Lord of the Iron Islands has crowned himself King of the Iron Islands and is calling his banners. Sails have been spotted. The North is expected to answer the call. Will Benjen ride? John looks up from his sticks. He is 6 years old, and he cannot read a letter's mood from the posture of the person holding it, but he is a child who watches, and what he sees in Benjen's face is enough to stop what he is doing. Uncle? Finish your tower, Benjen says. He folds the letter and puts it in his shirt. The problem is not the war. Wars happen. The problem is that John is 6 and cannot go to one and cannot be left here alone with the crannogmen who are good people and patient people but are not his family. Benjen turns it over for 2 days, moving through the routine of the tower and the causeway and the training drills he has kept up out of habit, turning it over each time he has a free moment. On the 3rd evening, he goes to find Howland Reed. He does not have to look long. Howland is sitting on a stone at the causeway's edge, watching the western reeds, a cup of something in his hands. Benjen sits beside him and tells him what is in the letter without preamble. Then he waits. Howland does not answer right away. He drinks from his cup. The neck moves around them in the last of the light. Reed sound and frog sound and the distant call of something unseen. Go, Howland says. You would watch him. I have been watching him for 6 years, Howland says. I know his habits better than you think. He pauses. The Iron Islands Lord is a fool who will learn what iron costs. Ride. Come back. Benjen rides north the next morning. He does not explain the politics to John in any detail. He explains only that there is a fight, and the North needs every man who can fight, and that Benjen is one of those men. John stands in the gate of the gatehouse tower and watches him go. He does not cry. He is too old for crying and too young to understand that being too old for it is not the same as not needing to. He watches until Benjen's horse disappears around the long curve of the causeway road, and then he goes back inside. Howland comes that afternoon. He does not say anything about Benjen. He sits down near the fire and takes out a small knife and a piece of wood and begins to whittle. John watches him for a while and then moves closer. This is how the next several months go. Howland Reed is not Benjen. He does not train John in the ways Benjen trains him. No sword drills, no bow practice, no weather reading exercises. What Howland does is sit in the tower and in the reeds and on the causeway, and John, having nowhere else to go and no one else to go to, sits with him. Howland talks when he has something to say, and is quiet when he does not. John, who has grown up in a place where silence is a kind of language, learns to understand the difference. Howland tells him about the neck, about the crannogmen, how they came to be the people they are, living on the water, building their houses on floats so that even their homes cannot be found by those who do not know the channels. He tells John about the plants that can be eaten and the ones that cannot, and the ones that look like each other and are not alike at all. He tells him that the neck remembers everything that has ever walked through it. Armies have come into the neck and vanished, not because they were destroyed, though some were, but because the neck simply swallowed their roads behind them and left them with nothing to walk back on. One evening, John asks, "What happens to everything it swallows?" "It keeps it," Howland says. "The swamp keeps everything. Nothing that goes into it truly disappears. It just waits." He looks at the boy. "Remember that. The swamp remembers everything that walks into it. Nothing escapes the swamp." John turns this over. He is 6 years old, and he files things away with the careful patience of a child raised in a place where stories and lessons are the main currency, where there is nothing else to spend your time on. "Does it remember us?" he asks. "It especially remembers us," Howland says. The campaign in the Iron Islands is not a long war. The lord who had crowned himself king learns quickly what crowns cost when the rest of the realm disagrees. The Iron-born fleet, which was the lord's greatest strength, meets the royal fleet in the Straits of Fair Isle and is destroyed there, burning ships in open water. the Iron Islands' proudest weapon turned to wreckage by the combined fleets answering the Crown's call. Without his ships, the Iron Lord has islands and walls and pride and nothing practical to hold against an army landing on his shores. Robert and Ned lead the final assault on the Greyjoy seat at Pike itself, and the castle falls, and the rebellion ends. Benjen is there for most of it. He is not a commander and not a lord, and has no men under him, which means he rides where the fighting is thickest and goes where Ned points him. He is a good soldier, the kind of training he has kept up at Moat Cailin, which was not courtly training, but hard, practical work in hard, practical country, turns out to have kept him sharp. He distinguishes himself enough that Ned notices. But that is not the story here. Benjen is not the story in the Iron Islands. He is a soldier doing a soldier's work in a war the North wins. The story that matters is the one waiting for him at the end of the Causeway Road when he rides south again. He rides the causeway at dusk. The sun is going down behind the neck's western horizon, and the light has gone flat and orange, catching the top edges of the reeds, and Benjen has been riding since before dawn, and his back is reminding him of it. He comes around the long curve of the causeway, and the gatehouse tower appears, and there are two figures on the southern battlement. One small, one not as tall as Benjen remembered. Jon has grown while Benjen was away. He is still 6, the same age as when Benjen left, but children at 6 grow in months rather than years, and the boy on the battlement is noticeably taller, noticeably more his own shape than the boy who watched him go. He is standing next to Howland Reed with both hands on the battlement stone looking south, and when he sees Benjen come around the curve, he goes very still the way he always goes still when something matters. Benjen raises a hand. Jon raises both arms above his head, which is not something Benjen has ever seen him do before, an unguarded exuberance that is usually not in him. And then he disappears from the battlement, and by the time Benjen reaches the gate, Jon is in it. Benjen dismounts. Jon is standing in the gatehouse entrance with his arms at his sides in the rigid way children hold themselves when they have decided not to do something they want to do. Benjen looks at him for a moment. "You grew," Benjen says. "You were gone a long time," Jon says. Benjen puts a hand on his head, and Jon, who has decided not to do the thing he wants to do, does it anyway, which is to step forward and press his face briefly against Benjen's chest the way a 6-year-old does when he has been patient long enough. Benjen's hand stays on the back of his head. He has not understood, until this moment, that what he was protecting by going to the war was not the North, or even Ned's honor in responding to a call. It was this, the right to come back to this. The boy standing in the gate with his arms rigid at his sides, fighting against being 6. The war is done. He is back. The gate is his. A letter comes from Winterfell 2 weeks later, in Ned's hand. The rebellion is closed. The defeated lord will keep his islands and his life, stripped of ships and banners and the crown he awarded himself. One of his sons is dead in the taking of Pike. Another, 10 or 11 years old, is taken as ward to Winterfell, where he will remain as surety for his father's continued peace. Benjen reads this and sits with it a moment. He thinks about a 10-year-old boy taken from his home and his islands and his family and installed in someone else's castle as something between a guest and a prisoner. He thinks about what it means to grow up as a ward, not your father's heir, not a lord's son in your own right, but something in the space between, neither fully himself nor fully anything else. He looks across the room at Jon, who is on the floor with his sticks again, rebuilding whatever it is he builds when he thinks no one is watching. Jon Snow, who is Ned Stark's ward, who is not anyone's son by any name the world knows, who has grown up in this ruin with a man who is not his father and a Crannog man who is not his lord, learning the ways of a swamp that does not belong to him, holding a name that is a shield rather than a truth. Benjen folds the letter and throws it in the fire the way he always does. Outside, the neck breathes in and out with the evening wind. Jon finishes his tower. 9 years pass in the neck, and by the end of them, the boy is not a boy anymore. Jon Snow at 15 stands on the causeway in the early morning with a sword at his belt and his dark hair flat against his head from the mist, and if you did not know who he was, you would not know who he was. He is northern in his build, broad-shouldered, not yet at his full height but close, the kind of frame that suggests it was made for cold weather. His hair is dark. His eyes are gray, the gray of the neck in winter, the gray of stone in poor light. He does not look like a lord's son. He does not look like anyone's son, particularly. He looks like what he is, A young man who has spent 15 years in a ruin at the edge of the world and learned everything the ruin had to teach him. The 9 years were not easy years to train a person through, and Benjen did not make them easy. He trained Jon the way a ranger trains, not the way a lord trains his heir. There was no wooden dummy in a yard, no master-at-arms calling out stances, no other boys to spar against in an organized rotation. There was the causeway at dawn, which is not a comfortable surface to run in the dark, and there was the marsh at the edge of the neck, which is not comfortable terrain to track through in any light, and there was Benjen, who was not a comfortable teacher. He put a real blade in Jon's hands earlier than was prudent. He taught him to fall before he taught him to stand correctly, on the theory that knowing how to fall is more valuable than knowing how to look good on your feet. He taught him the bow with a full-weight draw before Jon's arms had quite grown into it, and Jon's shoulders are shaped accordingly. What Benjen gave him was the sword and the bow and the reading of weather and the moving quietly through rough ground. What the Crannogmen gave him was everything else. The Crannogmen do not fight the way northern soldiers fight. They do not fight in formation. They do not hold ground. They do not announce themselves, and they do not accept the terms of a fight that someone else has set. What they do is move through terrain that would kill most men and appear where they are not expected and disappear again before the response can organize. They taught Jon this the way they taught him everything else, by doing it in front of him and letting him try to follow. How to move through reeds without disturbing the surface of the water, how to use a throwing net in close cover, how to hold still in the dark while something or someone passes 2 feet away from you and feel no more urgent than the reeds beside you. How to breathe so that you cannot be heard. Jon at 15 is not a courtly knight. He knows this. He does not have the forms that a Winterfell training yard would have built into him, the tournament stances and the proper footwork for a great hall floor. What he has instead is something harder to account for. He fights like the neck, patient and specific and quiet until the moment he is not, and then very fast. He is 14 when he finally asks the question directly. He asks it the way he asks everything he has decided he needs to know. Without preamble, on an ordinary evening, as if he has been saving it for a moment when the asking would not feel like an event. Benjen is checking the fletching on a row of arrows by firelight. Jon is sharpening the short blade he has been issued since last year. He says, "Whose bastard is he? Not which lord, not which castle." He has been told the shape of the answer before, and he does not want the shape. He wants to know whose blood he is carrying and why it matters. Benjen does not put down the arrow he is holding. He does not look at the fire or the ceiling or anywhere that would signal he is buying time. He looks at Jon and he gives him the answer he is able to give. The blood of Winterfell runs in him. He is Ned Stark's blood, as surely as any of the children at Winterfell are. That is not a comfortable truth or a simple one, but it is a real one, and it is more than enough to be. Jon takes this in. He turns it over. He is 14 and he is good at taking things in and filing them away and coming back to examine them later, and Benjen can see him doing exactly that. Accepting the answer, storing it, not being satisfied. The not being satisfied is quiet and it does not produce an argument. But it is there, and Benjen can see it, and he knows it will come back. Not yet, but it will. In canon, the story would give Jon a wolf. In 298 AC, on a road somewhere in the proper north, Ned Stark's ranging party finds a dead direwolf on the road and her litter of pups surviving in the cold beside her. And one of those pups is different from the others, an albino, white as snow, always slightly separated from the pack, found by the boy who is also always slightly separated from every pack he is near. In canon, that wolf is Jon's. The animal that mirrors him most truly is the one that does not quite fit, the one that is apart from the rest by nature, the one whose differences are visible in its coloring. In this life, Jon is at Moat Cailin in 298 AC. He is not on that road. He is not with Ned's party. He does not find the pup, and the pup does not find him, and that particular mirror is never held up for him to see himself in. But the thing that Ghost represented does not disappear, simply because the wolf is not there. Jon Snow has been the wolf apart since the day Benjen carried him south from Winterfell. He has always been the one who does not fit, the one whose nature is not quite accountable by the usual categories, the one who carries something in him that the swamp recognizes and the rest of the world has not learned to name. He does not need a white wolf to be what he is. He already is it. The neck has known it since he was small enough to fit in a cradle made from a pack and a folded blanket. The story does not give him the wolf. It gives him the swamp and the causeway, and 15 years of a man who chose him. Howland Reed watches Jon spar with one of the Crannogman boys on the causeway one afternoon. The Crannogman boy is older and has been doing this longer and is good. Jon wins anyway, not easily but cleanly, in a way that is notable not for its speed or aggression, but for its quality, something quiet and specific and precise that the Crannogman boy does not quite have an answer for, even though by rights he should. Jon ends the bout without cruelty, without showmanship, with the particular restraint of someone who understands that winning without breaking the other person is the harder and more useful skill. Howland finds Benjen at the tower afterward. He fights like someone who learned from someone good, Howland says. I taught him, Benjen says. Howland is quiet for a moment. You taught him the moves, he says. He got the rest from somewhere else. Benjen looks at Howland. Howland does not look back. He is watching the causeway, where Jon is standing, looking south, the way Jon always looks when he is not looking at anything specific and is therefore looking at everything. The silence between them holds something that neither of them names, and then Howland goes back into the reeds, and Benjen goes back to the tower, and Jon goes on looking south. The ravens come more frequently as 298 AC settles in. It is not unusual for ravens to come from time to time. What is unusual is the pattern. They arrive from different directions now, not only from Winterfell but from White Harbor, from passing merchants, from the ordinary flow of news that runs up and down the King's Road even through the Neck. Word that the King's Hand, the man who has held the position since Robert took the throne, the one whose ravens Benjen has burned every year for 15 years, is gravely ill. Word that the court at King's Landing is uneasy. Word that Robert is restless in ways that are beginning to make his lords nervous. Benjen reads each raven by firelight and folds it or burns it and says nothing to Jon. Jon is 15 and he watches his uncle's face. He has been watching his uncle's face his whole life, and in 15 years he has learned to read the things in it that Benjen thinks he is keeping to himself. He does not ask. He waits. He stands on the causeway in the mornings and looks south down the long, straight road through the Neck, and something in the air at the bottom of that road does not feel the way it has always felt. He cannot name what is different. He only knows that the quiet of the last 15 years has a different quality now. The way the swamp goes quiet before something moves through it. The particular held breath stillness that means the stillness is about to end. Jon keeps his sword sharp. He runs the causeway at dawn. He watches his uncle read the ravens in the firelight, and he waits for whatever is coming. The raven from Winterfell is not like the others. Ned's handwriting is still the same controlled hand Benjen has been reading for 15 years, still the same even strokes. But what the letter says is different. Robert Baratheon is riding north. The whole court is coming. The queen, the children, the lords and servants, and the endless apparatus of the Iron Throne on the move. Ned writes, "Bring Benjen, bring the boy. Come before the royal party and be gone before Robert's eyes settle anywhere near the great hall." And then, in smaller letters at the bottom, in a hand that seems to have pressed harder into the parchment than necessary, "Keep the boy away from Robert." Benjen reads it twice. Then he goes to find Jon. They ride north 2 days later, just the two of them and their horses, and enough provisions for the road. It is the first time Jon has been north of the Neck since Benjen carried him south as an infant, and Jon does not know it. But he watches the landscape change with a kind of hunger that Benjen has not seen in him before. The causeway ends, the bogs give way to solid ground, and the ground rises. Proper northern country, forests and hills, the long slopes of terrain that has bones in it rather than the flat soft world of the Neck. Jon keeps looking. He looks at the tree line and the skyline and the road, and the looking is not tourist curiosity, but something more like recognition, the way a person looks at something they have heard described all their life and are now seeing for the first time. "Is this what you grew up in?" Jon says on the second day. "The north, yes," Benjen says. "Not this part specifically, further east." Jon looks at the tree line for a while. "It's bigger than the Neck. Everything is bigger than the Neck." "The Neck doesn't need to be big," Jon says, which is the kind of thing a 15-year-old says when he is defending the only home he knows, and Benjen does not argue with it. They reach Winterfell in the night. Benjen has not been back since before Jon was born, and he has not thought carefully about what 15 years of absence would do to the experience of returning. What it does is make the castle unfamiliar in the way that well-remembered things become unfamiliar when you see them again. Too large in some respects, smaller in others, the details wrong from what he had stored in his head. The great gates, the twin curtain walls, the inner yard lit with torches, the sound of the hot springs underneath everything, the warmth that comes up through the stone floors and makes Winterfell livable in a cold that would kill an unheated building. He had forgotten that detail. The warmth under the floors. Jon has no frame for it at all. He rides through the gate and stops his horse in the yard and looks up at the walls. Winterfell in the dark, with torchlight on the stone, and the sounds of a living castle around it, is not a small thing to encounter if you have spent your entire conscious life in a three-tower ruin at the edge of a bog. Jon does not say anything. He just looks, with the particular stillness he has when something is reaching him more than he intends to show. Ned Stark comes down the steps to meet them. Benjen has been thinking about this moment for 2 days, and he still does not have a way to prepare for it. He dismounts and clasps his brother's arm, and they look at each other for a moment. 15 years of distance in a 5-second look, and then Ned turns to Jon. Ned Stark at 35 is the man he was going to become when he was 20. The weight he carries has settled into his face and the way he holds himself. His hair is dark still, shot through with gray at the edges. His eyes are the same gray they have always been. The same gray that is in Benjen's eyes, and that is, Benjen notices with a small internal jolt, the same gray that is looking back at Ned right now from Jon's face. They look at each other, the Lord of Winterfell and the boy he gave away 15 years ago. Jon sees a man who looks like his uncle but graver. A man built from the same material but forged longer and harder, with more use showing in the result. He sees someone who is clearly family, clearly Stark, and he does not fully know what to do with that, because he has spent 15 years with exactly one family member and this is a different one. Ned sees something he shuts away very quickly behind his eyes, something that crosses his face for just long enough to be real, and then he closes it, and it is gone. He looks at Benjen. Benjen nods slightly. "Jon," Ned says. Just the name. His voice is even. "My lord," Jon says, because he is not sure what else to call this man who is not his uncle and not his father and is not nothing. They are given rooms in the guest tower, away from where the royal party will sleep. In the morning, Robb Stark finds them. He comes into the yard where Jon is practicing footwork in the cold air, alone, the habit of a lifetime. He is Jon's age exactly, or near enough, born in the same year, both of them, which is one of those facts that sits strangely when you think about it too long. He is clearly his father's heir in everything the eye can see. The posture, the gravity of it, the sense that he knows what room he is in and who is in it with him. But there is a warmth in him too, an ease with people that Ned does not have and that Jon has never developed in 15 years of the neck. He smiles when he sees Jon, a real smile, not a courtesy one. "You're Benjen's ward," Robb says. "Jon Snow," Jon says. Robb nods. He looks Jon over with the frank assessment of a young man who has been training since he could stand, pricing out another fighter. Jon looks back. They are the same height. They have the same broad build. The same face, in some register that neither of them has the information to read. They circle each other the way two dogs of the same blood circle each other when they meet without introduction, not hostility, but the specific caution of recognizing something. "You fight?" Robb says. "Some," Jon says. They spar that afternoon. It is a better bout than it would be between most 15-year-olds, which neither of them remarks on. The younger children are harder for Jon to account for. They find him throughout the day, drawn by curiosity the way children are drawn to anything new in a castle that does not get much new. Sansa, 12, looks at him with the polite assessment of a girl who has been taught to assess people before she speaks to them and has gotten quite good at it. Arya, 9, tries to steal his short blade off the practice bench and is very close to succeeding before Jon notices. Bran, 8, asks him if Moat Cailin is real or a story. Rickon, 3, does not ask anything and makes no attempt at conversation, but at some point in the evening, Jon finds the small boy standing very close to him, leaning on his leg, asleep. Jon has no frame for children who live in a castle. He has only ever known the Crannogman children, who are quick and quiet and do not lean on you when they fall asleep. He looks down at Rickon and does not quite know what to do, and does not do anything, and the small boy sleeps on. Robert Baratheon arrives the next afternoon. Jon watches from the battlement above the main gate, Benjen standing just behind him. He has been told twice now, in terms clear enough to leave no room for interpretation, that he is to stay away from the king. He knows enough of his own situation to understand why, without being given the reason in full. He stays on the battlement and watches. Robert Baratheon fills a courtyard. He is massive, broader than Ned, broader than any man Jon has seen, built on a scale that suggests the world made him out of different materials. And he moves with the loud confidence of a man who has never in his life had to wonder whether a room wanted him in it. His hair has gone dark grey or black in this light, but his voice travels the full width of the yard without effort. He roars at Ned. He embraces him with his arms and his whole enormous presence, and Ned, who is not a small man, looks briefly compact. He laughs. He is loud. He fills everything up. He never looks up. He does not look at the battlement. He does not look at the boy with the dark hair and the grey eyes standing in the shadow of the parapet above him. He looks at Ned, at the yard, at the castle, at everything at his own level and nothing above it. And then the yard empties as the party moves inside. Benjen puts a hand on Jon's shoulder and steers him in the opposite direction. That night, Ned and Benjen sit by the heart tree in the godswood. The weirwood face is pale in the dark, red-eyed, its carved expression doing whatever stone and memory does in a place where people have been bringing their truths for hundreds of years. The hot spring nearby steams faintly. The godswood smells of earth and cold and something very old. Ned tells Benjen what is wrong. The king's hand is dead. The man who held court for 15 years, who kept Robert's reign working while Robert hunted and feasted and did the things kings do. Dead of an illness that came quickly and left nothing in its place. Robert wants Ned. He is going to ask, tomorrow or the next day, in terms that will not leave much room for refusal. Robert wants Ned to go to King's Landing and be his new hand. Benjen says, "Don't go." "I know," Ned says. "Don't. Whatever you think you need to find out, whatever is wrong down there, let it stay wrong. Stay north." "I don't have a choice," Ned says. His voice is quiet. It is the same voice he used in the Godswood 15 years ago, when he told Benjen what he could tell him and asked without asking for the thing Benjen gave. The voice of a man who has decided something painful, and is now just carrying it. If I refuse, he'll wonder why. If he wonders, he'll look. If he looks, he does not finish the sentence. He does not need to. Benjen stares at the heart tree. The carved face looks back with the patience of something that has been looking at the same river for 1,000 years. "Come back," Benjen says. "Whatever happens down there, come back." Ned looks at him for a moment. Then he looks at the heart tree. He does not say he will, because he is Ned Stark, and he does not promise what he does not know he can deliver. They sit there for a while, the two brothers, in the place where their father prayed and their grandfather prayed and all the Starks before them, until the fire in the godswood has burned low and there is nothing left to say that either of them knows how to say. This is the last time they will sit here together. They ride south from Winterfell while Ned's household is still packing for King's Landing. There is no ceremony to it. There is no goodbye that Benjen can find the right register for, and Ned does not try for one either. They clasp arms in the cold yard before dawn, the two of them, while Jon waits with the horses. Ned's face is the face he wore in the godswood, decided, already somewhere else, already in the south doing the thing he has concluded cannot be avoided. Benjen looks at him and wants to say something that will stick, something that will travel 500 miles south and still be loud enough to hear. He does not find it. He says, "Ride safe." Ned says, "Hold the gate." Then they are on the King's Road going south, and Ned's banner is somewhere behind them going north, and there is no particular moment when you can say the brothers parted because they were already going in opposite directions before they said goodbye. Moat Cailin receives them without ceremony, which is what Moat Cailin always does. The gatehouse tower, the hearth, the reeds moving in the evening wind. Jon unsaddles the horses without being asked, and Benjen climbs to the top of the tower and stands at the battlement for a while, looking south down the causeway in the last light. South where the road goes, south where Ned is going. The ravens, after that, are different. For 15 years the important ones came on a private bird from a private rookery, and Benjen burned them after reading. Those ravens stop. The ones that come now travel the ordinary chain. Tower to tower, maester to maester, the public network that carries information across the realm in the same slow, irregular way that rumors travel through a market. They are not addressed to anyone. They are just news of the kind that makes the stops it makes and arrives when it arrives and may or may not be accurate by the time it does. Benjen reads them all. He burns some of them. He keeps the ones that seem trustworthy and sets them in a pile on the table that he is not sure what to do with. The news comes in pieces, and the pieces are all bad. First, Robert Baratheon is dead. He was gored by a boar on a hunt, which is the kind of death that sounds impossible until you know Robert and then sounds exactly like his. He was a man built for dramatic ends. He had been drinking heavily before the hunt. In the account that Benjen reads, the detail feels true in the specific way that details feel true when someone has tried to make sense of something that doesn't entirely make sense. He lingered a few days, and then he died. The throne goes to his son, Joffrey Baratheon, 12 years old or close to it. Jon reads this one over Benjen's shoulder. He says nothing. He is 15 years old and he met the boy briefly in passing at Winterfell, Joffrey, the prince who had been present during the visit, not much noted by either of them, and now that boy is king. The next Raven, Ned Stark, has been arrested. The charge is treason. Jon's face when Benjen reads this to him is something Benjen will carry for a long time. It goes entirely still, in the way Jon's face goes still when something matters too much to show, and then it shifts, and the shift is visible and real. He is 15, and he has just learned that the only other man who is his family in the way that the world can see, not Benjen, who is a private truth, but Ned, who is the public story, has been arrested for treason by a boy king who was crowned a fortnight ago. Jon makes his decision within the hour. He is going to King's Landing. He tells Benjen this at the door of the lower room, already pulling on his riding gear with the specific efficiency of someone who has worked out the plan in their head before opening their mouth. Benjen stands in the doorway. "Move," Jon says. "No," Benjen says. "He's the only family I have that anyone knows about. I'm not sitting here while you'll listen to me." Benjen does not shout. He does not need to. He has the voice he was born with, which is the voice of men who are used to being heard in difficult country. You would ride 500 miles south on a horse with no army and no name worth speaking and walk into a city under martial law. Think about what happens when you arrive. Think about what Ned would want to happen, Jon thinks. It costs him something to stop and think rather than move, which Benjen can see. He puts his hands on either side of the doorframe and looks at the floor. He'd want you to hold the gate, Jon says. It comes out flat, which means he knows it's true and hates it. Both of us, Benjen says. Jon does not take the riding gear off immediately, but he does not go through the door. They hold the gate. They wait. The raven that comes with Ned's death does not come from any official source. It travels through White Harbor, where a merchant heard it from a ship that came in from the south, and by the time it reaches anyone who writes it down, it has been passed through 4 mouths and arrived in 2 letters that say slightly different things about the timing. But the central fact of it is consistent across both versions. The hand of the king was beheaded on the steps of the great sept of Baelor. The king commanded it. His own sword was used, the great Valyrian steel blade that has been in Winterfell's keeping for generations. That detail is consistent. Benjen reads both letters and does not need the details to agree on anything else. That detail is enough. He stands at the window of the gatehouse tower for a long time. The neck is doing what the neck does in early evening, the light going out of the sky, the reeds going dark, the frogs beginning their conversation across the water. Ordinary. Unchanged. Benjen stands at the window and lets it be ordinary around him and waits for the part of him that received the news to catch up with the part of him that is standing upright in a tower. He goes out onto the causeway. Jon follows him, which he expected. They walk to the middle of the causeway and stand on the stone road above the black water, and they stay there while the stars come out over the neck. There is no Godswood here. There is no sept. There is no place in this ruin to know sept. There is no place in this ruin to bring the dead properly, no ceremony that applies to what they are, no community of mourners to stand with. There is just the causeway and the water and the 2 of them. Benjen thinks about Ned's face in the Godswood at Winterfell, already decided. He thinks about Ned at 20, in a different Godswood, putting an infant in Benjen's arms. He thinks about the particular way his brother had of standing, a way that suggested he was already carrying something whether he was or not. The neck is quiet around them. The swamp keeps everything it takes in. That is what Howland says. Jon asks after a while, in the voice he uses when he has decided the moment is real enough to use it. Who is my father? Not in anger. The anger is not in it. The grief is in it, the grief that wants to fill itself with something more solid than what it has. Benjen looks at the black water and tells him what he has told him before. The blood of Winterfell. Ned's blood, in the only sense that the world has ever known it or ever needed to. He is a Stark by everything that has shaped him. The blood of Winterfell is real, and it is his, and it is more than enough. The words come out right. They have come out right every time. But this time he can hear the place in them where the rest of the truth would go, and he can see on Jon's face, that still, gray-eyed face that is so familiar it is almost painful, that Jon can hear it too, the hollowness, the shape where something is being withheld. Jon does not press. He looks at the water for another moment, and then he nods, slowly, once, the way he nods when he is filing something away rather than accepting it. He is not satisfied. He is only patient, which is the thing the neck has made him, and which is not the same thing at all. They go back to the tower. The next raven comes from Winterfell's Meister, and it is brief. Robb Stark has called the banners. The North is marching. The heir of Winterfell, 16 years old, is riding to war with every lord who still answers a Stark name. The raven itself is 3 lines. 2 of them explain what is happening. The 3rd line is Robb's instruction, given directly to the garrison at Moat Cailin. Hold the gate. Benjen sets the letter on the table. He looks at Jon. Jon looks back, already steady, already in the place he goes when the decision has been made, and what comes next is just the work. The war has come to the north, and the north is going south to meet it, and Moat Cailin is the only thing between whatever comes from the west and everything the Starks left behind them. They hold the gate. They wait. The gate does not open. The banners come from the north on a gray morning, and they are the most beautiful and terrible thing Jon has seen in his 16 years. He sees them from the top of the gatehouse tower before Benjen does. He has always had better distance vision, which Benjen attributes to years of scanning the causeway, and Jon attributes to nothing because it has never occurred to him to attribute it to anything. He is up there with the morning's first light doing what he does most mornings, checking the southern approach and the northern reads in a circuit that has become automatic. And when he turns north, the host is already on the causeway road, visible from here as a moving mass of gray and silver with banners lifting in the wind above it. Gray direwolf on white. The sigil of Winterfell, repeated 100 times. The banner of every lord who has answered a Stark name, the emblem of the North, marching to war. Jon stands on the battlement and watches them come, and something moves in his chest that he does not have good words for. He calls down for Benjen and goes back to watching. The host fills the causeway road from edge to edge. Thousands of men in column, horses and supply wagons, and the long grinding movement of an army in motion. The sound reaches them before the front of the column does. The clank of equipment, the voice of a host talking to itself in the low murmur that thousands of men make when they are moving and trying not to think too much about where they are going. Jon watches from the battlement as the column comes and does not seem to end, and he thinks about the handful of men and the handful of arrows that Robb Stark is about to ask them to hold this gate with. Robb Stark rides at the front. He is 16, and it shows in some respects and does not show in others. He sits the horse with the ease of a boy who grew up on horseback, which is an ease Jon does not have, having grown up on the causeway and in the reeds. He has his father's build, the broad shoulders, the gravity of posture that the Starks seem to come with, but not yet his father's weight, not yet the cost that Ned carried in his face. He looks like what Ned might have looked like before the world had finished with him, and the sight of it does something specific and strange to Benjen that Jon notices without understanding the full reason for it. Robb reins up at the gate and looks up at the battlement. "Benjen Stark," he says. He has his father's voice too, in pitch if not quite in texture. "You held it." "We held it," Benjen says. He gestures at Jon beside him. "Both of us." Robb looks at Jon for a moment. Jon looks back. They saw each other at Winterfell, briefly, in the corridors and the practice yard, and sparred one afternoon that neither of them has mentioned in the months since. They did not have enough time then to be anything to each other. Now, there is a war between that meeting and this one, and Ned is dead, and Rob is riding at the front of a northern host at 16 years old with his father's face and not yet his father's grief. And Jon is standing on the battlement of a ruin that he has spent his whole life in and is only now understanding is the only strategic position between the north and everything that might want to come through it. They come down to meet him in the yard. It is not a long meeting. Rob does not have time for long meetings. The column is still moving past them, and the river of men and horses stretching north behind him is waiting for him to be done with whatever this is and come back so they can keep moving. But he gets down from his horse, and he shakes Jon's arm like a man greeting a man, not a lord greeting a ward. And the two of them stand for a moment looking at each other at close range with the same gray eyes and the same face in two different registers, and Jon watches Rob almost say something and then not say it. "You stayed," Rob says instead. "Your raven said hold the gate," Jon says. "It did." Rob looks at the gatehouse tower, the crumbling children's tower, the leaning drunkard's tower, the fragments of curtain wall and the tree growing through the gatehouse's northern face. He takes in the whole of it with the practical eye of someone who has just recently become responsible for armies. Benjen tells me Howland Reed's people are in the swamp. "They've been here as long as I have," Jon says. Rob nods. He turns to Benjen and gets to the point, because he is Ned's son, and Ned did not raise a man who wastes time when the army is waiting. He cannot leave men to spare. He has every sword counted, and most of them need to be south of the neck, or the campaign means nothing. What he can give them is a dozen archers and a wagon of arrows, which on the southern face of Moat Cailin is not as thin as it sounds. He has talked to Howland Reed this morning, or rather, Howland Reed appeared and spoke to him briefly and then disappeared again, which amounts to the same thing. The Crannogmen will stay. The swamp is theirs. Moat Cailin is the gate, and the gate must stay closed. "Whatever comes from the west," Rob says, "does not march through this gate while my host is south of it. That is the charge." "We understand the charge," Benjen says. Jon does not say anything. He is standing slightly apart from the conversation, and the thing in his chest that the banners started is not moving in a comfortable direction. After Rob remounts and the column begins to flow south again, after the Grey Wolf banners and the thousands of men and the wagon creak of the supply train have moved past, and the causeway is empty again except for the garrison Rob has left, Jon says, "I want to go with them." He says it to Benjen. Benjen looks at him. "No," Benjen says. "I'm 16. I can fight. This is my family's war, and I'm standing in a ruin watching them march past me." "Yes." Yes is not an answer. "Your place is here," Benjen says. "The gate matters more than another sword. Rob said it and he's right and you know he's right. And that is the wrong move. Not because it is wrong, but because Benjen says it in front of the archers and the two Crannogmen who are standing near enough to hear. And the agreement with Rob in public does not leave Jon anywhere to stand. He knows Benjen is right. He knows the gate matters. He knows that a single sword added to a host of thousands does nothing that those thousands cannot do without it, while a single sword standing in the gate of the only passage through the neck is irreplaceable. He knows all of this. It does not help. They argue in the lower room of the gatehouse tower with the door shut and the fire going and the sound of the emptied causeway outside. Jon has never argued with his uncle like this. There have been disagreements, quiet ones, the kind that resolve themselves in a day because neither of them has anywhere to go. But not this. Not with real anger in it. The kind of anger that has been building since Ned's raven arrived with the wrong news, and Jon stood in this same room with his riding gear on, and Benjen blocked the door. He says what he has not said in 16 years. All his life, he has been told to stay. Stay at Moat Cailin. Stay away from court. Stay away from Robert. Stay away from the war. Stay. What is he staying for? Who is he actually, that he stays and watches the world go past him on the causeway road and holds a gate for a fight he is never allowed to be part of? Benjen looks at him. He does not argue back. He says, "You're staying because I'm asking you to. That is enough." It is not enough. Both of them know it is not enough. But Jon stays. He is on the causeway that night when Howland Reed materializes out of the dark beside him in the way Howland Reed materializes out of dark places, without sound, without warning, simply there when he was not there a moment before. Jon does not startle. He has known Howland all his life. They stand on the causeway for a while without speaking, which is the way most conversations with Howland begin. The neck is dark around them. The reeds and the water and the particular quality of silence that this place has, not empty silence, but full silence, the silence of a place that is paying attention. Howland says, "Your mother loved the north." John goes very still. "She would have loved this place," Howland says, "the way it guards everything behind it. She understood what it meant to guard something." John turns to look at him. "You knew her?" Howland looks at the water for a moment. "I knew of her," he says. Then he steps off the causeway and the reeds close around him and he is gone. And John is alone on the stone road above the black water with a sentence that is not enough and is more than he has ever had. He stands there for a long time. The Cranogman comes in from the northern reeds at mid-morning and he does not say anything. He steps onto the causeway from the water's edge the way Cranogmen step onto solid ground, with the careful transferred weight of someone who has spent a lifetime reading what the earth beneath him will do. And he walks to where Benjen and John are standing near the gatehouse tower gate, and he puts his hand flat on the causeway stone. Then he holds up his fingers, all of them, twice, more. He points north, then he points east, toward the sea. John looks at Benjen. Benjen is already looking north. The neck had been quiet for 2 months after the northern host passed through. They held the gate, and the Cranogmen moved through their swamp, and Howland Reed came and went in the way he always did, and nothing came from the south and nothing came from the north, and it was possible, in the worst hours of the night, to wonder if they were holding a gate that nobody wanted anymore. Robb had the North's army. The Ironborn had their islands. The war was somewhere else. Except the war is not somewhere else. The war is coming from the north, and the north is the wrong direction. Benjen spends the rest of that morning walking the northern perimeter of Moat Cailin, and the northern perimeter is a very different thing from the southern one. He already knows this. He has known it since the first week he spent in the ruin, 16 years ago, pacing out what the fortress was and what it was not. But knowing it, and standing in front of it with an ironborn force on the way, are not the same experience. The southern face of Moat Cailin is what the old kings built it to be. The gatehouse tower commands the causeway road from a height that makes archery effortless, and the causeway is the only land route through the neck, and on either side of the causeway, the bogs stretch away to horizons that swallow armies whole. The arrow slits in the gatehouse tower face south. The thickest walls face south. The fortress was designed by men who understood that the danger would come from the south and who built accordingly. The northern face is everything they did not bother to defend, because in the minds of the old kings, the north was home. The northern rubble is just rubble. The drunkard's tower leans at its old angle toward the northern approach, its upper floors compromised, its base more exposed than any wall should be. The children's tower crumbles from its parapet down, the top floors open to the sky, the stones of its northern wall, loose and displaced from centuries of ice and neglect. The curtain wall on the northern side is the worst of what remains. Fragments, mostly, sections, that collapsed in winters long past and were never rebuilt because there was never a garrison here to rebuild them. From the south, Moat Cailin is a fortress. From the north, it is a ruin. The Ironborn will not need siege equipment. They will need patience and willing men and the willingness to pick their way through rubble, and the Iron Islands have never had a shortage of any of those. Benjen finds Howland Reed at the western edge of the causeway, sitting on a stone and watching the northern reeds as if he has already heard everything the Cranogman scout reported and has spent the morning deciding how to feel about it. "They're coming from the north," Benjen says. "I know," Howland says. "The north face will not hold." "No," Howland agrees, "it won't." Benjen waits. With Howland there is always something coming after the agreement. "Don't let them get to the towers," Howland says. "If they reach the towers from the north, the towers are lost. The walls are rubble, and the rubble is a ladder. Keep them in the swamp." He looks up. "That is what we are for. The swamp is ours. The towers are yours. We will keep them in the swamp as long as we can." "And if you can't?" "Then we fall back to the towers, and you hold the gate with your archers, and hope the southern face is enough." Howland's voice carries no particular alarm in this. He is not an alarmed man. He sits on his stone with the same quality of patience the neck itself has, the patience of terrain. "But we will keep them in the swamp for a while. This is what we do." The crannogmen go into the northern reeds before midday. They do not leave in a group. They leave one at a time, stepping off the causeway at intervals and disappearing into the water and the reed beds as if the swamp is simply absorbing them, which is nearly accurate. Within half an hour, there is no sign from the causeway that anyone is in the northern neck at all. The water surface is undisturbed. The reeds move only in the wind. If you did not know that 40-odd men had just walked into the swamp, you would not know it. The Ironborn vanguard comes into view in the early afternoon. They come along the old drover's track that runs parallel to the causeway on the western side, a track that is not really a track anymore, but is slightly more solid than the swamp on either side of it. They are organized, not the chaos of a raid, not ship's crews turned loose on a coast, but a proper military column with scouts at the front and a clear command structure visible in how the men at the back take their pace from the men at the front. They are here in numbers, and they mean to take the fortress. They reach the edge of the firm ground north of the ruin, and they begin to form up. They pick their approach. Two groups, one toward the rubble at the base of the drunkard's tower, and one toward the northern curtain wall fragments. Standard. Smart enough. The rubble at the base of the drunkard's tower is the obvious breach, and they have identified it. Then the swamp takes the first one. It is not dramatic. A man at the edge of the formation steps half a pace left of the track to adjust his grip on his shield, and the ground that looks like ground is not ground, and he goes into his knee before the man beside him grabs his arm. There is a moment of reorganization, men pulling back from edges, checking what they are standing on. And in that moment of reorganization, from somewhere in the reeds to the west, a sound like a brief disturbance in the air, and the man who had grabbed the first man's arm is on the ground with an arrow in his throat. The response is immediate. Shields up, eyes to the reeds, shouted commands. But there is nothing to respond to. The reeds are still. The water surface is still. There is no visible enemy. There is only the swamp and the man in the mud and the dead man on the track and the particular silence of a place that has just demonstrated what it is capable of. This is how it goes for the rest of the afternoon. The Ironborn are not fools and they are not cowards. They are dangerous men who have spent their lives in hard weather on hard water, and they close up their formations, and they watch the reeds, and they advance anyway, because the Iron Islands do not produce men who stop because someone shot at them from cover. They advance, and the swamp takes them. Not in rushes, not in formations, but one at a time. A man at the edge of the track, a man stepping up to a rubble section to climb it, a man who paused for a moment in a place where pausing turned out to be a mistake. Each time, a sound from the reeds, or sometimes not even that, and then a man down, and the reeds still, and no target. John is in the reeds. He went in with the crannogmen when they went in, over Benjen's objection, and with the argument that he was the only garrison fighter who could actually move in the next swamp country without sounding like a horse falling downstairs. The argument is correct, which is why the objection did not hold. He moves through the reed beds on the western flank of the Ironborn's advance, not leading and not following, but keeping pace with the crannogman beside him, doing what the crannogman does at a half-second's remove. He is quiet. 15 years in the neck has given him that. He is not as quiet as the crannogmen who were born in this water and who move through it the way water moves through water. But he is quiet enough that an Ironborn soldier scanning the reeds in his direction does not pick him out. His first kill happens in the early afternoon at a range of about 4 feet. He does not choose it. A man comes off the track at the wrong angle, chasing a noise that was probably a bird, and steps into the reed bed where John is crouched in water up to his chest, and they are looking at each other before either of them has processed what is happening. The man is larger than John. He gets his sword half drawn before John gets there. It is bad and close and happens in bad mud, and when it is done, John is still standing and the man is not. And John is covered in the mud and the muck of the neck and something else, and the crannogman next to him is already looking away because there is nothing to look at. The next threat is east, and John follows his eye east because that is the correct thing to do. It is not heroic. It is just necessary, and then it is done, and the fight is still happening, and there is no time for it to be anything else. By nightfall, the Ironborn have lost perhaps 20 men to the swamp and hold none of the approaches to the towers. They pull back to the firm ground north of the ruin and they make camp. Fires appear. 6, 8, 10, a proper camp. Organized with perimeter watchers and a supply line back to wherever their ships are anchored to the north. They are not leaving. They have numbers, and they have time, and they have the patience that a siege requires. They have miscalculated the swamp, and they know it now, but miscalculating the swamp does not change the numbers. They plan to wait out whatever small garrison is holding this ruin. What they have not fully accounted for is the swamp behind them. Benjen stands on the upper battlement of the gatehouse tower in the dark and counts the fires. And then he counts the arrows in the garrison's inventory, and then he does a calculation that is not complicated but is not comfortable. The southern face of the fortress is still defensible. The causeway is still the causeway. The killing ground it has always been. The road that a dozen good archers can hold against a host. The choke point that the old kings built their legend on. If the Ironborn push south and try the causeway, the garrison can hold that face. The problem is not the south. The problem is that the Ironborn are camped to the north, and there are more of them than there are arrows. He thinks about Robb Stark, somewhere in the Riverlands, fighting his father's war with the North's army, depending on this gate staying closed. He thinks about how long they can hold before someone needs to know the neck is contested, before some rider needs to go south and tell Robb that the gate he left behind him is under siege from the wrong direction. Not yet. The Crannogmen are in the swamp behind the Ironborn camp, and the Ironborn do not know it yet. And until they do, the arithmetic is different from what it looks like. He will hold until Howland Reed tells him he cannot. Howland Reed has not told him that yet. The fires burn in the northern dark. The swamp breathes around them, patient and black and full of things the Ironborn do not know are there. 3 weeks into the siege, the Ironborn find the gap. It takes them that long because the Crannogmen are very good at what they do, and what they do in those 3 weeks is bleed the Ironborn steadily and without pattern. 1 man here and 2 men there, never the same place twice, never in the hours the Ironborn expect. They never commit to a position. They never leave a body the Ironborn can study for where they were standing. They simply reduce the northern force by a count that is small each day and adds up over 3 weeks to something the Ironborn commander cannot ignore. And through all of it, the Ironborn cannot get to the towers. They find the gap on a night with no moon. It is the section of fallen curtain wall on the northeastern side, where the Drunkard's tower's base has shifted over the centuries and pulled the connecting wall down with it, leaving a stretch of rubble that is lower than the rest, and that, in full dark with the Crannogmen concentrated further west, is not watched closely enough. A small party of Ironborn, with a careful leader who has been studying the ruin for 3 weeks, while the swamp bled, his men finds this gap and crosses it in the dark and gets inside the outer perimeter before anyone in the garrison knows they are there. Jon wakes to shouting. The gatehouse tower in the dark, the fire in the lower room low, the sound of boots on stone somewhere to the north that is not where boots on stone should be. He has his sword on before he is fully standing, which is the result of 15 years of being the kind of person who sleeps with his sword close. He takes the stairs to the upper room and then to the battlement, and the situation is immediately clear in the way that bad situations are often immediately clear. There are men inside the ruin who should not be inside the ruin, and they are moving toward the Children's Tower. They take the Children's Tower in the space of a few minutes. It is not well defended because it is not defensible. The structure has been crumbling since before Benjen arrived 16 years ago, its parapet gone, its upper floor open to the sky, its stones loose and wet and unreliable. The garrison had 1 archer posted in it, and the archer does the sensible thing when 6 armed men come up the stairs, which is to come down a different way and run. The Ironborn on the Children's Tower are crowing. They have a position inside the ruin now. They have a height that looks across at the gatehouse tower's northern face. And they have bows, and what they do not fully understand yet is that the structure under their feet is not going to last as long as they intend to stay in it, but they do not need it to last long. They just need it long enough. Benjen makes the call immediately. Fall back to the gatehouse tower. All remaining garrison fighters, both Crannogmen, all 12 archers. The gatehouse tower is the only structure in this ruin that still stands straight, the only one whose walls are thick enough to mean anything, the only one with a clear line down the causeway and enough height to make that line count. The curtain wall fragments and the outer perimeter are gone. What remains is the tower and the causeway and the strategic fact that has been true since the old kings built here. The road south runs through this gate and through no other place in the neck. They fall back to the gatehouse tower and they close it up and they shoot. The archers on the upper level have the causeway road at a range and angle that makes every arrow worth 3 in open ground. The Ironborn cannot move down the causeway without coming into that fire, and the causeway offers nowhere to shelter because it was designed to offer nowhere to shelter. A raised road of packed earth and old stone with water and bog on both sides. No cover, no angle, nowhere to go except forward into the arrows or backward away from them. 3 Ironborn try the causeway in a rush in the early morning, and 2 of them go down before the 3rd turns back. But the children's tower gives them something they should not have. A crossbow bolt comes from the northeast and strikes Benjen on the upper battlement. Jon hears it rather than sees it. The snap of a crossbow mechanism is distinct, and then Benjen is on the stone floor of the battlement and not standing, and Jon is across the space between them before the thought catches up with the movement. It is a bad hit. The bolt has gone in high on the left side, above the ribs, and what that means in terms of what is inside and what has been struck, Jon cannot fully assess in the dark on a battlement in the middle of a siege. What he can assess is that Benjen is conscious and pale and breathing in short, careful intervals that suggest the breath is costing something. "Don't stop shooting," Benjen says. His voice is controlled. He is looking at Jon with the look he uses when the important thing is the thing in front of them and the pain is a fact to be managed rather than addressed. "Get me down and don't stop shooting." One of the Crannogmen takes the cloth from his belt and puts it to the wound. Jon gets Benjen's arm over his shoulder and takes his weight, and they go down the stairs. And the archer, who has been standing back from the battlement during this, takes one look at Benjen and then goes back to the battlement because that is what Benjen just said. In the lower room, Jon lowers his uncle onto the pallet near the fire, and the Crannogman takes over the business of the wound, applying pressure with a competence that suggests he has done this before, which he probably has. Jon looks at the wound. He looks at Benjen's face. Benjen looks back at him with that same controlled expression that is doing something hard with a lot of practice. "Go," Benjen says. "You need?" "He has me," Benjen says, meaning the Crannogman. "The causeway needs you. Go." Jon goes back up the stairs. What he sees from the battlement is that the Ironborn are gathering for another push down the causeway. The 2 bodies from the morning rush are still on the road, and the Ironborn are not looking at them as an argument against trying again. They are forming up at the northern end of the causeway where the firm ground of the ruins approach meets the stone road, and they have shields up, and the formation is tight, and they are going to come regardless of the arrows. Jon goes down to the gate. He is not ordered to. Benjen is in the lower room with a crossbow bolt wound and is in no position to order anything, and the archers on the top level are the archers on the top level. What the gate needs is a body in it, and the gate is not going to put a body in itself, and Jon is the body the gate has got. The causeway in the daylight is the causeway as it has always been, straight, raised, exposed, with the black water of the neck on either side and the sky above it and nothing else. Jon takes the center of the road at the gate and settles into the stance that Benjen taught him in this exact terrain. The stance for a confined space where you cannot be flanked because the road is not wide enough for flanking. In open ground, Jon is a competent fighter with good training and no formal title. In this specific road, in this specific width, with water on both sides, he is something different. The road is 4 feet wide at the gate passage. You can stand in the middle of it and touch both walls with your arms spread. No one is coming at him from the side. They come at him from the front. The first push is 3 men, shields locked. Jon gives them the first several feet without fighting it, lets them come to where they want to be, and then he is not where they expect him to be. And the road is not wide enough for 3 shields abreast if one of the 3 is suddenly on the ground. He drives the push back to the point where the causeway opens into the northern approach and the Ironborn have room to reorganize. 2 of them are down, the 3rd goes back. The archers above him put arrows into the Ironborn formation while it reorganizes. The second push is 4 men and different tactics. 1 shield forward, the others angled to try to use the width as much as the width will allow. Jon takes a cut on his left forearm in this one, shallow, and the man who gives it to him gets the better end of the resulting exchange with the short blade Jon has had since he was 14. He drives this push back too, and the road behind him is bloodied now, and the Ironborn at the northern end of the causeway are looking at what the road costs and doing the accounting. In the swamp behind them, the Crannogmen move. With the Ironborn fully committed to the ruin, the assault party inside the perimeter, the main force focused on the causeway, the rear is empty. The camp, to the north of the ruin, the camp they have maintained for 3 weeks with its supply wagons and its horses, and the men who were not part of today's assault, has no one watching the western reeds. Howland Reed's people come out of the swamp in the grey afternoon and they do what they do, which is not a battle and not a siege, which is something faster and more complete, and leaves nothing useful behind it. The supply wagons burn. The horses scatter north. The men who were not on the assault and who are now between a fire behind them and the swamp on both sides have very few good options. The smoke rises over the northern neck in a column that the garrison on the gatehouse tower can see from the battlement. John sees it from the causeway. He does not know exactly what it means from this angle, but he knows what it means in general. The Crannogmen have done something to the north, and whatever they have done is large enough to be visible from here, and the Ironborn formation at the end of the causeway has seen the same smoke and is doing something different with its attention now than it was doing a few minutes ago. The withdrawal is not immediate. The Ironborn are not a force that turns and runs at the first bad sign, and the commander orders his people back in reasonable order, pulling the assault party out of the ruins' interior through the same gap they came in, falling back north toward a camp that is no longer there. Without supply, without horses, with the swamp having demonstrated over 3 weeks exactly what it does to formations and exactly what it will do again on the road north, the calculation has changed. They are gone by the evening. John stands on the causeway in the grey morning after, in the light that comes through the neck's low clouds without committing to anything. The ruin behind him is quieter than it has ever been. Not peaceful. Quiet in the specific way of a place where something has happened and the air has not finished deciding what to do about it. He stands on the road where 2 men's blood is dried into the stone and looks north at the empty approach and the empty place where the fires were. Then he goes inside. Benjen is on the pallet in the lower room where John left him, in the same position with the Crannogman still nearby. The fire has been built up. The wound has been bound with strips of cloth. Benjen is pale in the firelight, pale in a way that has nothing to do with the room's temperature. And he is breathing, which is the most important fact. He opens his eyes when John comes in. He looks John over, the cut on the forearm, the state of the rest of him, and something in the evaluation seems to satisfy something. "I taught you well," Benjen says. John looks at his uncle's face in the firelight. He looks at the man who carried him south on a horse in 283 AC and stood in the gatehouse tower 16 years ago, deciding this was enough. This would do. This ruin was the right place. He looks at the man who taught him the bow and the blade and the causeway in the dark and the weather in the sky and the sound of a threat coming before it arrives. And he thinks about a 4-foot road and 2 pushes driven back and the arithmetic of confined spaces. "You taught me enough," John says. The news does not come in a single letter, and it does not come from an official source. It comes the way the worst news comes, in pieces from different directions, each piece slightly inconsistent with the others in detail, but consistent in the central fact, which is the fact that John reads 3 times before he lets himself understand it. A merchant raven from White Harbor, relaying word from a ship that had come up the coast from somewhere south of the neck. A letter from a minor lord in the Rills addressed to no one in particular, just passed along the Meister chain. A note from a traveling septon, who had written down what he heard at an inn and sent it north because he thought someone should know. Robb Stark is dead. His host is gone. They were at the twins for a wedding, a reconciliation, the host thought, a mending of whatever had broken between Robb and the lord who holds that crossing, and the lord had offered them guest right, which in the eyes of gods old and new means bread and salt and the absolute protection of a host for his guests. And then in the night, under that guest right, they were killed. Not in battle, not in the field. At a feast, at a wedding, under the law of hospitality that is older than the 7 and older than the old gods' names. And the law was broken, and Robb Stark and Catelyn Stark and most of what remained of the North's army died inside a castle where they thought they were safe. John sits with this for a long time. He sits at the table in the lower room of the gatehouse tower with the 3 letters in front of him and the fire burning low and the sound of the neck outside. And he thinks about a grey morning on the causeway when a 16-year-old on horseback looked up at the battlement and said, "Hold the gate," and John had wanted to go south with him so badly that the wanting had turned into the worst argument he and Benjen had ever had. He thinks about Robb's face on that morning. The face that looked like Ned's face before the world had finished with it. The face that had not yet learned how to carry grief. He thinks about Catelyn Stark at Winterfell, watching him with her careful Tully eyes, not warmly but not cruelly, the woman who was the reason Benjen brought him south in the first place. Then he takes the letters and goes to Benjen's room. Benjen has been bedbound since the Ironborn siege. The wound did not heal cleanly. Wounds taken in siege conditions rarely do, and what seemed manageable in the days immediately after the battle has proved more costly in the weeks since. He is pale in the way that is not a temporary condition. He is thinner. He sleeps more hours than he is awake, and when he is awake, he spends some portion of it pretending he is better than he is. And Jon has learned to read the difference. He is awake when Jon comes in. He looks at the letters in Jon's hand and reads what is in Jon's face before Jon says anything. Jon reads the letters to him. All three. They say nothing for a long time after. The fire in Benjen's room is small. He runs hot now, the fever that comes and goes, and the light from it is unsteady. Outside, the neck is doing what the neck does, breathing, moving, indifferent to the fact that the North has been broken. Robb Stark, Catelyn Stark, everyone. Jon had known them for 4 days at Winterfell 6 years ago, and for an hour on the causeway when Robb had looked him in the eye and shaken his arm like a man. They were his blood, in whatever sense that word applied to him. They are gone now in the way that Ned is gone, and the manner of their going is worse than Ned's because at least Ned died for a reason that his enemies would admit to, while Robb and Catelyn died at a feast where they believed themselves protected by the oldest law in Westeros. The ravens that come in the following days fill in what the first 3 letters left out. The banners of House Bolton are rising across the North. The new Warden of the North, the title confirmed by royal decree from King's Landing, the reward for what was done at the Twins, is consolidating his hold on what remains. Winterfell is in Bolton hands, or what is left of Winterfell is, because Winterfell was seized by Theon Greyjoy the year before and burned on Bolton orders, and what the Boltons hold is a ruin inside a shell, a castle that was stripped and torched by the ward that Ned took in after the Greyjoy rebellion and whose family now holds the Iron Islands under the Crown's peace. The North that existed when Robb marched south does not exist anymore. Jon does not sit with this. He moves. He takes the Crannogmen and posts them in rotation along the southern approach to the causeway. Not all of them, not a garrison, but eyes at intervals, watching who is on the road from the south and how many and what banner they fly. It is the thing that needs doing, and no one else is going to do it, and Jon has been holding this gate for long enough that the work of holding it is as automatic as breathing. He sends one of the Crannogmen north with a message for the northern lords. He does not know which lords are still standing. He does not know what territory is still answerable to a Stark name. He sends the message anyway. The message says, Moat Cailin holds. The gate is still open for Starks. He goes back to Benjen's room that evening to tell him what he has done, and Benjen is awake and has been watching the door. Jon sits in the chair near the fire, the one that has become his chair in the months since the siege, the one that is always close enough for conversation and far enough that Benjen can pretend to be resting if he needs to. He reports, Crannogmen posted south, message sent north, the archers still on the upper level in rotation, arrows counted and adequate for some time yet. He reports these things with the efficiency of someone who has been running something and is accounting for it. Benjen looks at him while he talks. He has been looking at Jon that way more in recent weeks, with the specific attention of a man who is watching something carefully because he will not always have the chance to watch it. The way Jon stands when he is in the room, the way he goes quiet before he makes a decision, that particular stark stillness that is not hesitation but calculation. The face, which has always been the face it has always been, dark hair and grey eyes and the broad structure of a Stark, but with something underneath the structure that Benjen has looked at for 17 years, and that is more present now than it has ever been, now that the boy has become the man, now that the man has driven 2 ironborn pushes back on a 4-foot road. He says, "Sit down." Jon is already sitting, which means what Benjen actually means is, be still, stop accounting. Jon puts down the report he was giving and looks at his uncle. Benjen looks at the wall for a moment. Then he says, "Your mother was Lyanna Stark." The room is very quiet. "She was Ned's sister. She was my sister." His voice is careful and even and slow, with the cadence of a man choosing each word deliberately, not because he is unsure of them, but because he has been not saying them for 17 years, and saying them requires a different pace. "She died in a tower in Dorne, at the end of the rebellion, the day Robert Baratheon took the throne. She died giving birth to a boy, and her last words to Ned were a promise she asked him to make, and Ned made it, and he kept it for 16 years, and I have been keeping it for 17. Jon does not move. He does not speak. He is doing what he does when something reaches him more than he intends to show, which is to go absolutely still and let it in quietly, without the outside of him showing what the inside is doing. "You are not Ned's bastard," Benjen says. "You never were. You are Lyanna Stark's son. You are a Stark by blood, through her, as real as any Stark who ever lived. The snow was a shield. The bastard name was a shield. Ned gave you the best shield he had, and it was the name no one looks too closely at. And it worked." He stops. The fire moves between them. Jon says, "Who was my father?" Benjen looks at him. "A man Ned swore to protect you from," he says. "That is all I can give you right now." "That is not. I know it is not enough." Benjen closes his eyes for a moment. He is tired in the way that is not rest tired but something more foundational, the tired of a wound that has been taking more than it is giving back. "When I can tell you the rest, I will. If I can." He opens his eyes. "Not yet. There are things that need to be said in the right order, and I need more strength for the rest of it than I have tonight." Jon looks at his uncle's face. He looks at the pail and the fire and the careful breathing, and he does not push further, because pushing further would require not seeing what he is seeing, and Jon has never been able to not see things that are in front of him. He sits with what he has. His mother was Lyanna Stark. His mother was the woman the rebellion started over, the woman whose name is carved in the crypts of Winterfell, the woman Benjen has been grieving quietly for 17 years in the only way available to him, by keeping her son alive in a ruin at the edge of the world. The Crannogman comes the next morning with word from the south. Soldiers on the southern edge of the Causeway Road, a force visible from the reed beds. They are organized and provisioned, and they are not moving. They are waiting. Above their camp, in the gray morning air, a banner, the flayed man on pink, the sigil of the house that now holds the North's wardenship. They want the gate to open. They have not demanded it yet. They are waiting to see if it will open on its own, which is what a commander does when he is confident of his position and has enough patience to try the easy way before the hard one. Jon climbs to the top of the gatehouse tower and stands on the battlement and looks south. The causeway runs straight and long through the neck, the same road it has always been, and at its far end there is a camp and a banner and a force that believes it has inherited the North. Behind Jon, the gatehouse tower is quiet, and Benjen is in the lower room with his wound and his unfinished truth, and the Crannogmen are in the reeds, and the archers are on the level below. Jon looks south for a long time. The gate does not open. The rider comes down the causeway from the south under a white cloth tied to a lance, which is the oldest signal for negotiation that exists, and Jon watches him come from the top of the gatehouse tower. He is a single rider, well mounted, in the livery of the new Warden of the North. The message he carries, when he reaches the gate and calls up to the battlement, is polite in its phrasing and without warmth in its intent. The new Warden of the North, by royal decree from King's Landing, requests that the garrison at Moat Cailin open its gates and stand down peacefully. The war in the south is resolved. The Crown's authority has been re-established. There is no cause for the gate to remain closed, and the Warden is prepared to be generous to those who recognize the new reality of the North. Jon listens to this from the battlement. He lets the rider finish. Then he sends him back with one sentence. The gate does not open for men who killed their king under guest right. He watches the rider go south down the causeway, back toward the force assembled at the road's edge, and then he watches the force for a while from the height of the tower. It is large, organized, a real army provisioned for a siege, with cavalry and archers and the patient disposition of men who have been told to wait and who will wait. The causeway runs straight from the tower's base to the edge of the force's camp, raised above the bogs on both sides. No firm ground on either flank, no angle for siege equipment, the same killing ground it was when the old kings held it against hosts 10 times the size of anything this garrison could muster. The southern face of Moat Cailin is the defensible face. That is what the old kings built. That is what the ruin still is. Underneath the fallen curtain wall and the crumbling towers, underneath the centuries of neglect and the tree growing through the gatehouse's northern side. The causeway is the causeway, and the bogs are the bogs, and the archers on the upper level have the road at an angle that makes every arrow count 3 times. And a force that cannot bring siege equipment to bear cannot take a tower by waiting on a road. The force to the south knows this. They know it, and they are waiting anyway, because patience is a weapon too. Jon goes back inside. Benjen's room is the smallest room in the gatehouse tower, which was not a consideration when they assigned it to him, and which does not matter now. What matters is the fire and the window and the pallet. and Benjen on the pallet, thinner than he was a month ago, thin in the way that means the wound is still taking from him more than rest is giving back. He is awake. He has been awake since before the rider arrived. He heard the call from the battlement and has been lying with his eyes open and his hands still, waiting. He looks at John when John comes through the door. "Well?" Benjen says. "They'll wait," John says. "The road holds them. They have no way around." Benjen nods. He looks at the ceiling for a moment. Then he says, "Close the door and sit down. It is time for the rest of it." John closes the door and sits in the chair. Benjen is quiet for a moment in the way he is quiet when he is organizing something difficult into the order it needs to be set in. The fire between them is small, and the room is warm enough, and outside the neck breathes its usual breath, the reeds and the water and the frogs that do not know or care what is happening on the causeway. "Your father," Benjen says, "was Rhaegar Targaryen." The room is absolutely still. The Crown Prince, Aerys's son and heir, before Robert killed him at the Trident. Benjen's voice is even, the voice he uses when the thing he is saying is important enough to require steadiness. "He and your mother were not what anyone thought they were. Everyone believed it was a kidnapping. It was not. They went together. They loved each other, or as close to that as can be known now, and in Dorne they wed in secret before a heart tree, with witnesses. His first marriage was set aside. Yours was the legal union." He pauses. "You are not a bastard in blood. You are the son of Rhaegar Targaryen and Lyanna Stark, and if the world were arranged differently, that name would mean something." John does not move. He receives this the way he receives hard things, with the whole of him going quiet and the outside of him going still, with the gray eyes that are his mother's family's eyes, taking in what is being said and doing something internal with it that does not show on the surface. Benjen continues. "Ned knew. He was at the tower when she died. She made him promise to keep you safe, and the specific danger she was protecting you from was Robert, who hated Rhaegar past the point of reason and had already ordered the deaths of Rhaegar's children by his first wife. If Robert had known you existed, he would have killed you before you could sit up on your own." Ned understood this, and he made the promise, and he kept it. I helped him keep it. He closes his eyes briefly. "For 17 years. That is the whole of it." John says, "Does Howland Reed know?" "He was there," Benjen says. "He has known since the beginning." John looks at the window. The light through it is the gray, diffuse light of the neck in the morning, neither bright nor dark, the light that suggests the sky has decided not to commit to anything today. He can hear the reeds from here, the faint movement of them in the wind off the bogs, and somewhere further out, the sound of water. He sits with what he has been given. Rhaegar Targaryen, the crown prince who died before Jon was born, the man Robert Baratheon built a war around, the man whose name was the most dangerous name in the realm for the first 15 years of Jon's life, and is now simply a dead man's name because the king who hated it is also dead. The blood of the old dynasty and the blood of Winterfell joined in secret in Dorne, and the result is Jon Snow sitting in a ruin at the edge of the north with the causeway holding an army at bay and his uncle dying in the only bed the tower has. "It doesn't change what I am," Jon says. Benjen opens his eyes. "No," he says, "it doesn't." They look at each other. The fire moves between them. Jon thinks about everything that has been built in this ruin in 17 years. The hearth, the shuttered windows, the room that was made for him on the second level, the crannogmen who took up residence at the causeway's edge and never quite left, the swords and the bow and the running of the causeway at dawn and the reading of weather and the moving quietly through the reeds. He thinks about a man who was offered the black and chose this instead, who spent 17 years in a falling-down fortress in a bog for reasons that do not simplify into a word. Benjen Stark dies before noon. He goes quietly, which is how he did most things, without announcement, without drama, in the specific way of a man who has finished the thing he stayed for. Jon is in the room when it happens. One moment Benjen is breathing in his careful, rationed way, and then he is not. And the room is the room it has always been, stone walls and fire, and the sound of the neck outside, and the man who carried a child south from Winterfell on a horse in 283 AC is gone. Not beyond the wall, where the canon version of his life would have taken him. Not lost to the darkness north of Castle Black, Not half dead and half something else in the frozen country past the edge of the world. Here, in a room he built into a home, in a tower he chose to stand in, with the boy he chose to keep. Jon sits with him for a while. Then he gets up. He walks out of the tower and onto the causeway. It is morning still, the grey neck morning that does not know how to be bright, and the causeway is empty in both directions. To the south, at the road's far edge, the force is there. The banners of the flayed man on pink catching the flat light. The camp organized and patient and full of the particular energy of men who have been told they will get what they want eventually. To the north, the neck stretches away into mist and reed and black water, into the country that does not have a name in the language of lords and armies, into the swamp that keeps everything that walks into it. Behind Jon, the 3 towers of Moat Cailin, the children's tower crumbling from its top down. The drunkard's tower leaning at its old angle, the angle it has held for centuries and will hold for centuries more. The gatehouse tower, largest and widest, the only one that still stands straight. The tree growing through its northern face with its roots in the old stone, and its branches reaching out through the gaps in the wall, as if the tower and the tree have been arguing about which of them is more permanent and have agreed to disagree. Howland Reed is somewhere in the reeds. He is always somewhere in the reeds. The crannogmen are in the swamp. The dozen archers are on the gatehouse tower's upper level with their bows and their count of arrows and their angle on the causeway that turns the road into a killing ground for anyone who tries it. Jon stands at the gate. He has no name worth a king's fear. He has no army, no banner, no title that means anything beyond this ruin and the water around it. He has the causeway, which is the only land passage through the neck. He has the swamp, which belongs to the crannogmen and has been bleeding armies since before there were armies in the north. He has 17 years of everything Benjen Stark spent on him, the bow and the blade and the weather and the reeds and the causeway at dawn and the first kill in the bad mud and the 4-foot road where a man standing in the center cannot be flanked. He does not open the gate. He goes back to the tower and he writes a raven. Not south, not to King's Landing, not to the warden who sits on a road waiting to inherit what he helped destroy. North. He writes it for every northern lord still standing in the ruins of the north, for every house that answered a Stark name and survived what was done at the Twins to come home to, for anyone north of the neck who needs to know that there is one gate still open and one passage still held. The message is short. It says, Moat Cailin holds. Come home. He sends the raven into the gray sky and watches it go north until it is gone. The force on the southern road sits in its camp and waits. They have time. They have patience. They have numbers and supply, and the crown's authority and all the practical advantages that come with holding the North's wardenship. The swamp has been here longer than any of that. The gate has been here longer. The 3 towers have been crumbling for centuries and are still standing, and the causeway runs straight through the bog, as it has always run, and the bogs on either side have been swallowing what walks into them since before the first king stood here and called it a fortress. Jon stands at the gate, and the gate does not open. The North was broken everywhere that it could be broken, at the Twins, at Winterfell, in the Riverlands, in the burning of the army that rode south to answer for Ned Stark. But at the neck, at the narrow place where the King's Road threads through the bog and the old towers stand watch over the only road that connects the North to the rest of the world, a boy no one has ever heard of holds a gate that no one is supposed to care about, and he will not move. His uncle gave him the gate. His uncle gave him the secret. His uncle gave him 17 years and a ruin and a causeway at dawn, and the particular kind of stark stubbornness that does not ask whether the thing is possible, but only whether it is right. And in this ruin, in this tower, with the banners of the flayed man on the road to the south and the crannogmen in the water and the archers on the battlement, it is right, and the gate holds, and the neck keeps everything that walks into it. Westeros is a land filled with exciting stories and possibilities, and we love exploring them. If you want to accompany us on this journey across the 7 kingdoms and beyond, then please like,